Morning. Welcome to Senate Commerce Committee. It's that time of year where I think every committee is using every second they have to get their work done. You know, they say you can't squeeze blood out of a turnip, but man, I've seen some chairs squeeze a bill out in 30 seconds. And so appreciate your patience as we're all scrambling to get our work done and get to our committees on time. So thank you for your patience. Committee, we will open a hearing on House Bill 2344, expanding the membership of the Council on Travel and Tourism. We will begin with an overview by our reviser, Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. House Bill 2344 is brought to you by the Department of Commerce. It relates to their Council on Travel and Tourism. It also modifies a matching grant program the department has for the promotion of tourism. It reduces required allocation of funds to public and nonprofit entities. It removes a restriction on the percentage of funds granted to a single entity, and it also does some replacement of outdated terminology, references to wildlife parks and tourism, and it replaces those with references to the Secretary or the Department of Commerce. So if you look at the bill, the first page there is really just stylistic changes. On the second page, we have some changes to the membership of the council, as I mentioned. So we have some additional council members. You can see those in lines 25 through 28. These are additional members that are appointed by the governor. And each of these organizations submits a list of 3 individuals, and then the governor selects one. So lines 25 through 28, you see the National Independent Venue Association. Nominees have to be Kansas residents from that organization. The Kansas Museums Association and the Kansas Sampler Foundation. The other changes are primarily stylistic changes. And then turning to page 3 of the bill, we have those changes to the fund, the grant fund, toward the bottom of the page. You'll see there that there's a change from 75% on line 31 to 50% with respect to monies in that grant fund that have to be allocated to public entities or entities exempt from taxation under 501c3. There's also language that is stricken on 35 to 37, language there that pertains to a certain percentage that has to go, that it may not, a percentage limitation on money that can go to any single entity. And if enacted, this bill would become effective July 1st, 2023.
Thank you. Questions for Charles? Seeing none. Thank you, Charles. We'll start with proponent testimony. First, we have Rachel Willis, Director of Legislative Affairs from the Kansas Department of Commerce. Welcome back to committee, Rachel.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Rachel Willis, Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Commerce. So thank you for allowing me to testify in support of HB 2344. And like the reviser outlined, it removes the references to wildlife and parks in the tourism statute. It expands the membership of the Governor's Council on Travel and Tourism and modifies the Attraction Development Grant Program. So on July 1st of 2021, Kansas Tourism became its own independent division within Commerce. This reorganization was the result of input from businesses and destination marketing organizations and other key industry partners, which all agreed that it was best to consolidate Kansas's tourism efforts with the economic development initiatives. As a result, there are a few minor changes to the statute that we're seeking that governs the Kansas tourism that need to be made. So the bill removes the references to wildlife parks and tourism and changes it to commerce. Additionally, it updates the references to specific legislative committees to reflect the current committee names of the legislature, so very technical in those aspects. The bill also includes some additional changes. We would like to add 3 additional members to the Governor's Council on Travel and Tourism, bringing that total number of members up to 20. The new representatives would include a Kansas resident from the National Independent Venue Association, the Kansas Museum Association, and the Kansas Sampler Foundation. These new members represent different stakeholders who all have an interest in the travel and tourism industry in our state. They'll bring great value to the council as it guides Kansas tourism and continues the efforts to bring more visitors to our state. So then lastly, the bill aligns the grant allocation percentages for the attraction development grant with the needs of our state. So it's designed to assist in the development of sustainable, market-driven travel experiences within the state, increase visitation to Kansas, and generate economic impact resulting from the creation of jobs, capital investment, and tax revenue. So in the last year, so 2022, we had 22 nonprofits and 17 for-profits apply for this particular grant. And we provided a total of $251,544 in grant funds. So these changes would allow the amount to be given or allocated from 75% to 50%, so just making it an even divide between those two eligible entities, public and private. We really think that this better aligns with those organizations and will allow us to continue to award the funding to the most feasible projects that are described in the application process. So while we consider these changes minor, we do believe that they are critical and that they will further support the work of Kansas tourism. The division looks forward to welcoming new members to the council and distributing the grant funding in a manner that aligns with the demands and projects submitted. So I ask that you pass this bill favorably, and I will stand for questions when appropriate.
Thank you so much, Rachel. We do have one other oral proponent, and that is Natalie Bright, Executive Director of the Travel Industry Association of Kansas. Welcome, Natalie.
Madam Chair, honorable committee members, I am Natalie Bright here on behalf of the Travel Industry Association of Kansas, known as TIAC, just to stand in support of House Bill 2344. The industry works very closely with the Division of Tourism. We're very involved in the council and do support adding those additional voices to the council. It's advisory, but there's a lot of great things that are talked through and worked through at that advisory council, and so we do support having those extra voices to participate in that. And then the attraction development grants, again, is a great opportunity to partner with our local communities for those different events, and so we do believe updating that program and creating those percentages that will reflect the current need and request would be a worthy investment and help us get the best ROI on the investments in those programs. So I will stand also for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Okay, committee, that ends our proponent testimony. Are there questions? Senator Tyson, then Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. I do have a few questions. And I know you're saying more voices, but in software computer IT, we have a graph that shows you the more members, the more communication methodologies, the more errors for interpretation, more issues. You've already got 17 members. Why would you increase it to 20 knowing that you can have a negative impact with that many members? I mean, how can that even be I know the House does on their committees, but that's a very extensive increase, I think.
Rachel.
Yeah, that's a great question. And really, as we think about tourism overall, we just try to be as inclusive as possible so that we can get, again, a good variety of key stakeholders at the table to really help us make sure that we're promoting all of our wonderful assets here in the state. And so we think that those three are, while one is pretty new as far as being a key stakeholder here in the state, the other two just represent, again, really kind of key voices within the industry. And I think also at no time would we want to say, just because of the number, that we want to try and then decrease or remove somebody from that council. So while 20 does seem like a lot, we think that it's manageable and it's important as we think about just continuing the efforts of Kansas tourism.
Thank you, Madam Chair, if I may.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you. Are there reimbursements then for the meetings and travel?
That's a great question. I don't believe so.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
The elected officials who serve.
Yeah.
Could we get clarification from the revisers or research on that? Before we work the bill? And then I would also ask too, wasn't this attempted a year? I mean, I know that it hasn't been that many years that tourism was under wildlife and parks, and now we're going back the other way.
Rachel.
If I may, Madam Chairman, I also would like them to address its considerable change on the 75% to 50% reduction.
Rachel, would you care to respond to those two?
Sure. Yeah, so you're right. The move of Kansas tourism to the Department of Commerce did happen recently, specifically July 1st of 2021. And in that reorganization, there was some statute cleanups that didn't happen. And so that's all that component of this bill is doing. So in the tourism statute, it's removing the name of Wildlife and Parks and Tourism and changing that to Commerce to reflect the new situation and the new home of Commerce.
And can you address the 75 to 50% as well?
Yeah, so this is our attempt to really just align ourselves with the applications that we're receiving and making sure that we are always funding the most feasible project. And so we think that 50-50 divide, based on, again, the applications that we're receiving, makes the most sense and gives us the flexibility to award the projects that are the most feasible and will have the most impact and hopefully bang for your buck.
Senator Tyson, final question.
Thank you. So this, it appears as if the main focus of the bill is to clean up language, but there's a lot more going on in this bill than that. And so that's, I just want people to understand that. But my question is, I would like, and this is going to be a lift from, I would like a list of all of the grant programs, all of the tax credit programs, all of the financial programs that Commerce has available at their fingertips. My understanding, I want to figure out how they were able to come up with $300 million for one company. So I would like to know with travel and tourism where all this money and the breakdown is. And I know there's supposed to be a website, if you could send us that link, but I would like that spreadsheet if I could. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
We will make that request. I see the department taking notes. We do have additional questions from Senator Holland.
Yeah, if I could ask some questions of Natalie.
Before I see Rachel is wanting to address something. Yes, Rachel.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to just address your comments and say that, yes, there are, we agree there are other things happening in this bill besides those technical cleanups. We thought that we would take advantage if we're going to open up that particular statute to go ahead and make the changes that Commerce really and the Division of Tourism believes needs to happen and align with what we're seeing from our community. So that's why we tackled it in this particular fashion. Regarding all of the grants and and those sorts of things in that one particular company. I think that you're referring to specifically our incentive programs, and those that dollar amount did come from our traditional incentive programs, and all of that information, once that agreement has been signed, is available on our transparency website, which I think was the other component that you're referring to. So I will get you those links and provide those additional details. So thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Natalie. Yes, Senator Holland.
Natalie, good morning. And first of all, for full disclosure, I think TIAC and Natalie do a great job. I've been really impressed what you do for, basically our travel and tourism folks. As a full disclosure, I have a Kansas domestic winery, and there have been some marketing things I think you guys have done in the past to help, people in the agritourism industry and focus on that. And I just think it's really important, the work you're doing. And I'm assuming because you're here today that you full-heartedly support the expansion to include these other groups on the board. Would that be correct?
We do, because of the voices that they bring to the table.
Okay. And so, and kind of dive in more on the technical side on this, I guess is that currently, what is the current annual, for this particular grant program, the Tourism Development and Promotion Matching Grant Program, what's the annual dollars that could be awarded under that?
I do not know the answer to that. I would have to defer to Rachel or the department.
Okay, but I guess my question is that we're not changing that amount in this bill, obviously, right? It
is my understanding that there was not a request for an enhancement in that part.
Okay. So basically, what we're doing is we're basically kind of adjusting the mix between our nonprofit stakeholders and the for-profit stakeholders, correct? Kind of go from a 75 to a 50.
It's my understanding it's just a realignment to reflect better what is being requested.
Okay, and so from your perspective, in TIAC and just what's been going on here, can you comment about why you think that is important that we have that shift in priorities?
I think tourism is really focused on that return on investment, and so I think that's why if we're going to invest those dollars, we want to make sure it's reflective of what the current market looks like, and that's why we're supportive of it.
Okay, and so because you obviously through TIAC, you help represent that industry, are we going to get in a situation of where because we're shifting that blend that say there may be a squeeze on the nonprofits to get the dollars they want, or I think conversely is that do we have enough dollars there to be sure that those on both sides of the fence, nonprofit and profit, are getting access to those funds that truly help promote the industry, and there's not going to be a competition essence between those two groups. Do you have any concerns about that?
TIAC has a great working relationship with the Division of Tourism Department. Bridget Job came from industry, so she truly understands and reflects what industry looks like. And so based on our conversations with her is why we come forth with support, because we do believe it's reflective of what the current market is, what the asks are. And so we want to be responsive to that and, again, have the best investment of those dollars.
Okay, so you don't have any concern about basically the nonprofits getting squeezed if we do this realignment? That
has not been raised by my members, no.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Senator Ware.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Travel and tourism goes way beyond one small niche industry. One thing that you've probably heard me say is that every new Kansan, which we're all wanting to increase our population base in Kansas for workforce development, for all manner of commerce issues, every new resident starts as a visitor first. That's just truth. Right? Possibly these days the visitor could be virtual, but rarely is that the case. So with that, and I have been on the Travel and Tourism Council for the last 5 years, and as to having too many people on the board, I don't really feel like that will be an issue. It's a very amenable board. People from all different industries and backgrounds, and certainly the Wildlife and Parks facet is very well represented. There are folks from, I'm not sure what they call themselves, but I'll say the quick trip type businesses, so folks who are, traveling along the way to museums, to full-on regular, what you typically would think of as a recreational venue, destination. It's across the board. And of course, there are legislators too, which is a lovely thing. And as to the change in the
Senator,
balance,
do you have a question for the proponents?
I don't.
Okay. Well, when we work the bill, I think
Okay.
we're glad to hear all of the arguments, but at this point, we're just taking some questions so we can.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I don't know which one this would be for, but I really have concern over this deletion of no more than 20% of the money granted to the public or nonprofit entities. So you're wanting to subsidize or support nonprofits by deleting that language?
Rachel?
Thank you. Good question. So that, again, is specific to the grant, right? And it is about the allocation of those funds. So we would like to have flexibility to, if the application is feasible and we think prudent and is asking for more than 20% of our total allocation, we would like to be able to award that to one specific entity, whether that's a nonprofit or a private entity. Our total grant award amount is less than $300,000.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just have concern over that. Thank you.
Any other questions for the proponents? Seeing none, committee, we have no neutral, no opponent testimony, nor do we have any written testimony. So with that, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2344 and turn our attention to working some bills. We will start with House Bill 2173, and we will have an overview from, or refresher, I should say, from our reviser, Charles. You're fine to sit right there.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This House Bill 2173, as the committee will recall, relates to building codes and other rules. It essentially is a prohibition to prohibit political subdivisions of the state, counties, cities, to prohibit or ban refrigerants that are approved for use under federal law under the Environmental Protection Agency's regulations. So, in a nutshell, this would provide that if a refrigerant is approved on the list that is published by the Environmental Protection Agency, then a political subdivision of the state, which is broadly defined in lines 15 through 19 of the bill, would not be able to prohibit it, assuming that the equipment containing the refrigerant is used and installed in accordance with the provisions of federal law.
Any questions for Senator O'Shea?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry, I wasn't going to ask a question. I was just going to move to pass the bill favorably.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator Dietrich. Discussion on the bill. I do have an amendment. I would move to change the effective date from publication in the statute book to upon publication in the Kansas Register. So it's been moved by Erickson, seconded by O'Shea. On that amendment, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So we will need a motion to Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would make a motion to move House Bill 2173 as amended favorably for passage.
A motion, second by Senator Dietrich. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed, no? Motion carries. Do you care to be recorded, Senator? Okay. Thank you. We will now turn our attention to House Bill 2234. Charles, if you could give us a refresher on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So the committee will recall House Bill 2234 deals with the construction, public construction, and it deals with the cost threshold with respect to when a negotiating committee is required, and increases that so agencies can basically use a simplified procedure.
Thank you. Questions for Charles? Seeing none. Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move that we amend this bill to change the enactment date for publication, or from publication in the statute book to upon publication in the Kansas Register.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator O'Shea. Questions or comments on the motion? Senator Holland.
I got to ask the question, since these are House bills, are we trying to get this to conference committee for some reason?
We are making the amendment to change the date. Motive is secondary. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We're back on the base bill. Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move that we pass out House Bill 2234 as amended favorably.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator O'Shea. I'm seeing a pattern. Seconded by Senator O'Shea. Discussion on the bill from the committee or questions? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you very much, committee. We will take up one more bill this morning. It is House Bill 2292. This is the Kansas Apprenticeship Tax Credit. Charles, if you could just give us a brief overview of that bill.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So House Bill 2292 sets up the Kansas Apprenticeship Act. There are three programs involved. There's a tax credit for-profit employers if they employ an apprentice. That tax credit is kind of subdivided into two different credits, or actually three. And then there's also a grant program for nonprofit organizations for the same purpose, to assist with establishing registered apprenticeship programs and employ them. And then finally, a grant program for apprenticeships for teachers. The second one I should mention is specifically worded to include healthcare organizations. And then finally, as I said, the third one for teachers, a grant program for apprenticeship for teachers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee questions for Charles. Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know during the hearing, Charles said that they were non-refundable and not carry forward. Is that correct?
Charles.
Senator, yes. Yes, that's correct.
So they expire if they do not use them that year?
So I believe there's a provision that they may be carried forward.
That's what you said, non-transferable. So I wanted to make sure that the carry forward and if there's a sunset.
I believe there is a sunset, yes. Well, let me see here. I believe there is. I just need to find it. You know what? There may not be a sunset. I guess I'm getting this confused with another bill. Don't believe there is.
So there is not a sunset, but they're non-refundable, non-transferable, but carry forward with no sunset. Is that accurate?
For all three credits?
Or all three?
So, right. So the credits, if you you can find those on. Let me see here. I think I believe there is a provision that they may be carried forward. So the credits, if you you can find those on. Let me see here. I think I believe there is a provision that they may be carried forward. So the credits, if you you can find those on. Let me see here. I think I believe there is a provision that they may be carried forward. So the credits, if you you can find those on. in Section 3 on page 3 of the bill. The first credit is for tax at the bottom of page 3. And the second credit is in the middle there on page 4. And then there's another credit on the bottom of page 4. And trying to find the language that limits it.
Well, if I may, Madam Chairman, I see two different amounts on page 4 and on page 5. One is $7,500,000, and then on page 5, the top of page 5, it's $10 million.
I can explain
Charles.
that.
So is one
That one's
for
a
the
little easier.
grants and one for the credit.
Yes, Charles.
Yeah, correct. That question actually, I don't have to search through the text. The 7.5 million is for all tax credits. That's the limitation for all tax credits. The limitation of 10 million, which you see at the top of page 5, is for all tax credits plus 2.5 up to 2.5 million for the grant program for nonprofit organizations, including healthcare organizations. So if you look at the section dealing with nonprofit organizations, you'll see that the appropriation for that grant program is up to 2.5 million or 2.5 million. And so you add that plus the 7.5 million for the tax credits, all of them, and you get an aggregate total of 10 million. And then, as I mentioned at the hearing, there's an additional 3 million for the final grant program for teachers.
Senator Tyson.
So I just want to be clear, since because we kind of got into this trouble on a different program. So we're saying $7.5 million cap on the tax credits, but they can carry forward the tax credits. So does that carry forward, subtract from the $7.5 million? Is it a cap each year? Or do they continue handing out the tax credits up to $7.5 million and the carry forwards continue also?
Charles.
Senator, the language at the bottom of page 4 is way at the bottom. The aggregate amount of all tax credits for all eligible employers issued pursuant to this section shall not exceed 7.5 million each taxable year.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure that counts the carry forward. I don't know that anybody in revenue is here to answer that. But thank you, Madam Chairman. I won't belabor it, but we do need that answer because it does impact the fiscal number.
I would like to know that as well. Does that $7.5 million include the carry forward, or is that capped each year, including the amount of the carry forward? Do you know, Charles?
I think the way it would work, at least as I understand it, is, you get a credit in a tax year, and that would go against the 7.5 million in that tax year. And then, you take that, it says tax eligible employers issued. So, I would say it probably would not include it, that the carry forward has been issued, and then the initial credit would. But, if the committee wants to be clear about that, I would suggest an amendment, because the language is, issued pursuant to this section shall not exceed 7.5 million. So, just looking at, I guess this hadn't been something that has come up before, but just looking at it, I would say that issued means that the secretary issued the credit, and that would not include, carry forwards.
Thank you, Charles. That would be my understanding, that because since it says 7.5 million tax credits, that would be the limit issued per year, not including the carry forward. That would be my understanding, but I don't know that.
If I may, Madam Chairman, that could cause great problems. We had a peak program that was capped at $6 million a year, and a previous Secretary of Commerce interpreted that he could give out $6 million a year. And so that would be how this is being interpreted too, that they could give out 705 each year tax credits. Well, those could be carried forward. I mean, we could be looking at a substantial impact to revenues at some point if they didn't use their tax credits up in 1 year, they all saved them. And I'm just a what-if scenario.
Appreciate that, Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do not have a question of the reviser. Are you ready to start working the bill?
Committee, are there any other questions for Charles? Seeing none, we will begin working the bill. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do have an amendment that the staff will pass around for the benefit of the committee. You will notice I'll go ahead and start explaining the amendment because it's, I think, fairly straightforward and simple, but you will notice on page 7 and on page 10, there are two particular funds that one is for, by the way, this money comes from the State General Fund to the Kansas Nonprofit Apprentice Grant Program Fund is one of the funds, and that's the first one on page 7. So the amendment would state, okay, I'm going to back up. Under the bill, any unexpended balance in the fund would carry forward into the next year. But it also states that each year, $2.5 million are put into the fund. So I'm uncomfortable with us putting $2.5 million in. They are not expended. It's carried forward. Then we put another $2.5 million in. It's carried forward if they haven't expended that. So that fund could build significantly. And I saw no cap at all on the, and the reviser can correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw no cap on the amount of carry forward money that could be in this fund. So I was more comfortable by putting into the bill that any unencumbered, which means it's spoken for, it just hasn't necessarily been spent, balance at the close or the end of the fiscal year would be returned back to the State General Fund in excess of $2.5 million. So that would be the amount that the fund could have in it. That would be the maximum amount that the fund could have in it at the end of any fiscal year. That was my intent. I believe that's the way the amendment is written. And then on page 10, the same thing with the Kansas Educator Registered Apprenticeship Grant Program. It's exactly the same, except it's $3 million versus $2.5 million. So again, rather than funds just build up, if they are not expended, then they go back to the State General Fund. I'm uncomfortable, Madam Chairman, in leaving a lot of taxpayer money, because this is State General Fund money, out there for an agency to allow to build up and then all of a sudden start expending. If they do determine that the dollar amounts we have established, 2.5 million, 3 million, are insufficient, they can come back to the legislature and ask that those amounts be changed. But again, this is pretty straightforward. If the funds are not encumbered at the end of the fiscal year, anything above the 3 million or above the 2.5 million is returned to the State General Fund, so the fund does not just grow and grow and grow. So with that, I'll be happy to stand for questions.
Questions for the carryover of the amendment? Senator Holland.
No, not so much for the amendment. I'm just wondering, Madam Chair, is it appropriate maybe for our stakeholders that basically testified on this, if it's appropriate to get their 2 cents on their thoughts of this? And if it's not, that's fine.
Yeah, at this time, we'll limit it to committee comments or questions on the amendment. Any other? Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On this amendment, and when they carry the cash forward, and if they wanted to spend it down, can they spend it down without coming to the legislature? Let's say they got it built up to $5 million or something. So on Senator Peck's amendment, it would be limited to 2.5 million. But let's say this amendment didn't pass and they got 5 million and they wanted to spend it down. Do they have to come before the Senate, or can they just spend it unchecked?
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam.
Care to address it?
Be glad to try to answer that question. My understanding is they could spend whatever amount is in the funds, but again, I will certainly defer to the staff or revisers if I have misspoken. But my understanding is whatever amount is in the fund, they can expend it all in 1 year. So if it's accumulated to $5, $7, $10 million in that particular year, they could expend a significant amount of money.
That's my understanding as well, Charles. They would not have to come to the legislature to expend the funds. It's just there would be this limit if this amendment passes for the carryover from year to year. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Other questions on the amendment? Seeing none, would you like to move your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would move that we amend House Bill 2292 with the distributed balloon.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator Tyson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We are back on the base bill. What is the wish of the committee?
Madam
Senator Dietrich.
Thank you. I would make a motion that we move out of House Bill 2292 as amended favorably for passage.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator Dahl. Discussion. Seeing none. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Committee, that concludes our business for the day. Thank you for your work and input. We will not meet tomorrow. However, I need to draw your attention. We will be working Monday to work bills previously heard. Yep, Monday. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.